Session for the City Council for the City of Wildwood, Missouri. Ms. Elders, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Bowen,
Here.
Councilmember Clark, Councilmember Bartoni,
Here.
Councilmember Nyan, Councilmember Farmer,
Here.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
Here.
Councilmember Rambo,
Here.
Councilmember Flasher,
Here.
Councilmember Garitano,
Here.
Councilmember Brost,
Here.
Councilmember Edens, Councilmember Ottenberg,
Here.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Here.
Councilmember Marshall, Councilmember Jaxi,
Here.
Councilmember Hopper, Councilmember Galani.
Here. Okay, welcome everyone. Good to see all of you. Before we get to action items, we have 24 informational items. Does anyone have anything they want to mention or have a question about on the informational items before we go to action items? All right, seeing none, moving to action items. The first action item is the solar panel survey results. All of you have been provided with those. We've also posted them with the agenda. Just to sort of crystallize what I think the options are before the council, and this would be potentially to draft new legislation, depending on what you want to do. I think there are two, given the results of the survey, which are essentially 2-to-1 in favor of front-facing solar panels. One would be to continue with the CUP process that we currently have. I did ask Tom to pull the numbers on those that have been before the Planning and Zoning Commission as part of that CUP process since, I believe, 2016. Is that correct? 2014. And there have been 13. And of those 13, 3 were rejected, but 2 of those are still before the council. So for all practical purposes, 1 has been rejected during that period of time. So that's option 1. Option 2 is to have legislation prepared that would avoid the CUP process. And we would ask our city attorney to develop guidelines that our Department of Planning could use to permit these essentially as you would a grading permit. So those are, I think, your 2 options. Theoretically, a third option for the council is to not have front-facing solar panels, but I think that's not practical given the results of the survey. So it's only theoretical. Councilor Bartoni.
Thank you. So is this something that we can do today as a council, or does this need to go back to P&Z?
I think that's a little yes and a little no. On a macro basis, this issue of what we're going to do going forward is certainly before the council. And so if the decision of the council is to maintain the CUP process that we have, and there are pros and cons with that, there are also pros and cons with the other option, then the council can decide that and no legislation is necessary. If the council decides that it wants to have front-facing solar panels simply signed off on by our Department of Planning, then that would be a motion to prepare legislation, and that legislation would then come to the council at the next council meeting. So that's the first part of my answer on a macro basis. On a more micro basis relative to I think there are 2 applications that the council picked up, correct, City Attorney Young, that are before the council? Correct. Okay, so I would defer to the city attorney as to how and when the council will handle those. Those need to be handled expeditiously as well as anything else that's been postponed at the CUP level by Planning and Zoning Commission, because the only reason those were postponed in total was to allow the survey to be done. And the survey has been done, so we need to move on. So City Attorney Young, would you please respond to Councilor Bartoni's question as to the 2 applications that are before the body and when and how the council would deal with those? He's indicated he would rather discuss that in closed session.
That's fine. So right now, since this is an action item, so I think it's obviously the will of the residents to move forward with the results of the survey. And I think it's pretty much the council here supports that. So if we want to, I guess, allow the front facing solar panels, allow the different types of solar panels and not have those restrictions and kind of, to use your words, like, you know, the department can make decisions, but like a grading permit or a fence or something like that. Is that something that the council can, like, do I make a motion to do that right now?
If that's
or-
your wish, that would be your motion.
That would be my wish, and I will make that motion.
Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Farmer. Is there any discussion on the motion? See no discussion, we'll ask our city, I'm sorry, Councilmember Marshall, my apologies. Yes,
Can
Well-
that appropriately be
well,
added to the motion?
okay,
or
well,
would that be a-
hold on, hold on.
Okay,
So we have two types of pending applications. As to those before and City Attorney Young, correct me if I'm wrong, in what I'm getting ready to say, as to those that are before the council, the city attorney's indicated he would rather discuss those with the council in closed session. As to those that are not, I believe those could go forward at the next P and Z meeting. And I've already had that discussion with our city team members, and that's the plan. Councilor McCutcheon.
So since we're going forward with the residents' wishes, which we should, and the survey is on the agenda, Don made a motion, I think, to move forward with the residents' wishes.
That's his
And-
interpretation of the residents' wishes is to have to change our regulations to avoid the CUP process and to have rules set up with the city attorney that would allow our Department of Planning to just grant them or not, depending on those rules, like it would a grading permit.
Okay, so this may be out of line question. And I guess you'll let me.
That's
know.
right. Well, we'll see what it is. Go ahead.
So I would like us to maybe establish a committee or send it back to Planning and Parks so that we can get this wrapped up quickly. Is that possible?
You can make a motion to refer the main motion to Planning and Parks if you wanted. I think the intent of the motion is to have the city attorney do it and bring it back to the council at the next meeting.
Is that your intent?
that is my intention, because from the way I just understand the process, that would be the quickest way to get to move forward
Exactly.
with what everybody's wish is.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Agreed. Yeah, we're already steps ahead. Yes. Councilor Garetano.
Yeah, thanks. And just a reminder that if you do speak, please put your microphone on. I didn't hear the prior comment. My comment is related to moving forward with this. So now that we do have the survey results and the residents have spoken clearly through these results, I would support that we direct our city attorney to go ahead and prepare that legislation so that these requests then could move through more efficiently versus the existing process that we have today. So that's where I stand with that. And I think, of course, then if something does not fit those guidelines that are defined as allowing the solar panels to go through, those I believe would still continue to go through the CUP process if they didn't meet those requirements. So that's my question to either you, the mayor, or city attorney.
That's correct. So the CUP, and thank you for that question, Councilor Garetano. So the CUP process always exists for something like that. Well, not always, but in this instance, I believe would exist if the department determines they don't comply with the rules that are developed, then they could request a CUP. Is that correct, City Attorney Young?
The typical process and something that wouldn't be compliant would be a variance procedure, and that is certainly available.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Hopper, just to bring you up to speed. So we have the solar panel survey results. You've seen those, I'm assuming. And so the motion on the floor that we're getting ready to do a vote on is to not continue with our CUP process, but to have legislation prepared by our city attorney working with our city team members here that will grant or deny front-facing solar panels based on rules that they develop rather than have, like they would a grading permit currently, rather than utilizing the CUP process. That's what the vote's getting ready to be taken on. Okay, any questions? All right. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right,
And
that
Jim,
is,
can I make a comment also?
Sure.
So, I mean, I'm glad everybody is supportive of this, but I know the city has had a lot of negative press on this recently, but I think might be an opportunity, or probably is an opportunity for us to go from, I mean, it might be a little harsh to say we've been behind the times a little bit, but we're definitely could be we're being very proactive, and we can be looked at as a city that's leading this, the solar industry at this point also. So hopefully we get some positive,
well,
feedback out of this as well.
that's a point. And from my perspective, putting that aside, as well as other points, I think the greater issue here is that, and I hope we consider using it again, given the inexpensive nature of it and so forth, is that we did an unadulterated review of our residents' wishes without conflict of interest. And it was done very statistically sound. And it's just a great tool that we can use to determine what our electorate wants. And I think that's the big issue here. Councilmember Dodwell.
I was just going to reiterate the same thing, that I think it was a very positive move that we made to go out to the residents and find out what's important to them, and look at it just like you would any other vote that is given here on the dais, to be able to provide our residents with what they want and what they're requesting. So thank you very much, all of you, for voting for the survey. Thank you very much, Thomas, for obtaining a cost-effective method for us to be able to do this with a very reputable individual that both the mayor and I were able to sit in and meet with. So if anybody questions our outcome from the survey, I would stand toe to toe with them. And I feel like we had a very good amount of our residents respond to this survey, something like, what was it, 590 or something on average. We usually get about 150. So thank you to the residents of Wildwood for telling us what you want.
Absolutely. And one thing I would just mention as we go forward with this, when we see the legislation, this is a 2/3 versus 1/3 vote. All of our residents are important. All right, any further discussion? Okay, that takes care of that. Thank you. Next is the ad hoc municipal building committee. So I mentioned this in one of my mayor's reports a few weeks ago, and then you subsequently have a memorandum with those individuals that I'm recommending to be on this committee if you approve it. For the reasons I mentioned in the memo and in my mayor's report, this building is, it's got some age on it, and we have lots of things going on in our town center. In the spirit of proactiveness, I think it would be advisable for us to form an ad hoc committee of the members indicated in the memorandum that you have relating to this committee, to basically look at short and long-term issues and options for our city relative to our municipal building. So if there are any questions about my thought process for that, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, if you're in favor of this, I would ask for a motion to approve it, the formation of the committee with those individuals that are mentioned. Councilmember Dodwell. Okay, so we have a motion to approve the formation of the ad hoc committee. And the composition, I assume, is included in your motion as indicated, correct? All right, is there a second? Second by Councilor Bartoni. Any discussion on the motion? See no discussion on the motion. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Yes, ma'am. Councilmember Dodwell.
One other question. When are this committee going to be doing their work, and when are they going to be reporting back to council?
That's up to the committee.
Okay. Thank you.
We'll be contacting them tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. All right. Next is the zoning summary sheet. Mr. Vinich.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, the Planning and Parks Committee was given the task to develop a development summary sheet that would be attached to any type of land use issue that would be presented to City Council. The committee took 2 meetings to basically go from a preliminary draft to final draft, and that final draft is before you tonight for consideration and action. The committee did add a major item relative to the disclaimer, wanting to ensure that anybody that looked at the summary knew that there was a great deal more information available, and certainly not to make all decisions based upon the summary. So tonight, Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, the committee is respectfully requesting a motion and second to adopt this summary as presented, and it will begin implementation almost immediately. Thank you.
Okay, any questions or, and so Joe, the implication of the zoning summary sheet is what?
It's just a kind of Cliff Notes version of those lengthy reports that we present to the City Council after the commission's gone through its process. And as you know, as we add public comment, as we add different versions of the preliminary development plans, et cetera, it's a lot to kind of go through. And so this is just kind of a way to make it easier for everybody to understand the main points.
Okay, and so you're looking for the, so why does the council need to approve this, I guess is my question.
Well, again, it came from the council to committee, and so therefore the committee was just returning it so you could see the final product. Certainly, if you don't believe it needs to be endorsed or adopted, that's certainly fine. All I know is the committee certainly endorsed it and wanted it to be utilized.
Okay, no worries. Is there any objection to the summary plan on zoning as presented? Seeing no objection, it's adopted. Thank you, Mr. Vinich. Composition. Oh, before we get to that, I want to mention just a couple of things I forgot. Ms. Eldridge, could you please, I don't have the memo on the municipal building committee. Could you please read those names for people that may be watching that don't have access to the document so they'll know who the council members are that are appointed to that, have been appointed to that? Or I can try it by memory. Councilmember Nyan, Councilmember Farmer, Councilmember Marshall, Councilmember Grost. and
Councilmember
Edens.
Gross, Councilmember Edens, Councilmember Nyan, Councilmember Farmer, Councilmember Marshall.
Okay, perfect. And I want to thank each of them for their willingness to be on that committee. The other thing, going back up the line on the agenda, just as a housekeeping item relative to the solar panel decision that was just made, on the main meeting agenda, you will note that under item Roman numeral 9A, Bill 2799 is the bill that came out of Planning and Zoning Commission relative to this. That bill is inconsistent with the actions of the council. So when we get to that, and actually I'm going to ask for permission to rearrange the agenda to bring it forward right out of the gate when the meeting starts, in case there are speakers that we're planning to speak in opposition to that, they're not going to need to, because I think the operative procedural action on that would be a motion to postpone indefinitely, which kills it. Okay, any objection to taking that action when we get to that point? Okay, so we'll do that. All right, now back to our work session agenda. Composition of Historic Preservation Commission, Mr. Vinich.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, the Historic Preservation Commission has been considering changes to the composition of it over the course of the last 3 to 4 months. Those changes would include the following: making the Planning and Zoning Commission member liaison a voting member of the Historic Preservation Commission, much like was recently done for the City Council liaisons on the commission. Secondly, to add up to 2 student advisors to the commission. Over the course of the last year, we've had 1 student advisor, Nolan Meyer, who's done a wonderful job and has added a different perspective to the meetings, and the commission thought that trial was very successful and would like to proceed forward. And in the recommendation report from the commission, there are qualifications for those student advisors. And then finally, the last addition would be an advisor to the commission. In this particular case, the commission was thinking that there are members of the commission or the community that have a great deal of experience in historic preservation, either through firsthand knowledge or participating on the commission or society's boards. So therefore, the thought is to have someone of that knowledge and that level of experience to assist the commission on special projects or any other item that might be necessary for their attention. So tonight, the department is presenting draft legislation via this report that has been developed and reviewed by the city attorney for consideration. If the consideration is favorable, the department would respectfully request a motion to complete the preparation of legislation and have it at the next available meeting of city council for action. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or a motion? Councilor Nyan. Okay, as presented, is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Councilmember Galani. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Next, Madison Valley Memorial Plaque recommendations, Mr. Vintage.
Again, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, as you all may recall, recently the City Council approved a name change for a group of residents that were served by Old Slave Road. As part of that change to Madison Valley, the City Council adopted a requirement that a memorial plaque be developed. And that responsibility was provided to the Historic Preservation Commission. Since that initial action by City Council, the Historic Preservation Commission has been working on this particular item diligently and has reached the conclusions that it is providing to the City Council and Mayor tonight. First, the type of marker. The marker will be identical to the 11 historic community markers that have been established throughout the community, Wildwood, over the course of the last several years. There is graphics that represent that marker, and it is a very nice looking marker, and almost everybody that sees it thinks it's well deserved for this type of recognition. Secondly, the text. The text has been reviewed by multiple people, including descendants of Elijah Madison, and ultimately even Colonel Gregory of the St. Louis County Police Department. All have basically provided comments. Those comments have been integrated into the text, and ultimately the commission adopted it as presented tonight. And then finally, the location. And in this particular instance, the commission looked at several locations, ultimately whittling it down to two. One was at Madison Valley and Wild Horse Creek Road, and the other in Babbler State Park. The location on Wild Horse Creek Road at Madison Valley had some issues relating to parking and safety and just the extent of noise with traffic on the roadway itself. Ultimately, the commission chose Babbler State Park. It is in an area very close to Madison Valley and Wild Horse Creek Road. It is also in the vicinity of property owned by the Coleman and forgot the name of the other family, my apologies. And therefore it seemed to be a natural fit. And the partnership with Babbler State Park, I think, can go a long way to not only incorporating this and adding additional dimension to it, but also helping them kind of interpret their history even more so than they are now. So tonight, the Historic Preservation, Coleman and Tyler family, sorry, the Historic Preservation Commission is respectfully requesting endorsement and acceptance of the marker type, the text, and location. If there are any questions, certainly council members Nyan and Rambo and I can address them as best we can. Thank you.
Questions for Joe or a motion? Councilor Farmer,
I'll make the motion to move forward.
as presented.
Yes, sir.
Okay, is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Jaxi. Any discussion on the motion? See no discussion on the motion. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. That takes us to executive. Let's do receipt and files. If we can rearrange the agenda before we go into executive session. Any objection to that? All right, perfect. First receipt and file, Windsor Crest Alleys, Mr. Vintage.
Thank you again, sir. And Mr. Brown can assist in this if I step off the path and say something wrong. Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, under the new policy for acceptance of private improvements for public purposes, the Planning and Zoning Commission is required to review any type of potential dedication. This particular review occurred last Tuesday night, and the Planning and Zoning Commission unanimously supported accepting these private alleys for public purposes. Mr. Newberry is providing you an aerial photograph of the Windsor Crest subdivision, which is located in the northwest quadrant of Route 109 and Route 100. Again, in the report from the Planning and Zoning Commission, it notes several reasons for this support. First and foremost, the ability of the Planning and Zoning Commission under policy and state statute to provide this recommendation and action, the practicality associated with it, the consistency with the master plan and a component of the master plan, the town center plan, which was amended by the Town Center Update Team, the Planning and Zoning Commission, and City Council to accommodate this type of conversion from private to public. And again, a key component of the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendation and action was that the policy established for such be met. So tonight you have a favorable recommendation for receipt and filing. If there are any questions, certainly Mr. Brown or I, along with the liaisons, Mr. Mayor and Mr. Brost, relative to the Planning and Zoning Commission, are available for any responses. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Joe relative to this item? All right, seeing none. Next, PZ 17-23, Johnson Outdoor Game Court, Mr. Benich.
Very quickly, and Mr. Mayor, thank you again. Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, the Planning and Zoning Commission was asked to review and act upon a proposed pickleball court as part of Wardenburg Farm subdivision. Wardenburg Farm subdivision is located on the south side of Wild Horse Creek Road at Wardenburg Farms Road. The Planning and Zoning Commission considered the information inclusive of a favorable report from the trustees of the Homeowners Association and recommended approval of this location. This item is before you tonight for receipt and filing. And if there are any questions, please, we'll do our best to answer them. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Benich relative to this item? Or Councilmember Ottenberg? No need to do that. This is just for information. So these are here. If the council actually doesn't like them, you can make a motion to pick them up and handle them on your own. So you're all good. All right. But the sentiment is appreciated, I'm sure. Okay. That takes us to, thank you, Mr. Benich, for your work there. That takes us to the executive session. We will need to have a motion and a roll call vote under Missouri law for this. So Councilmember Farmer makes a motion to go into executive session, seconded by Councilmember Bartoni. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Ms. Eldridge, please call the roll on the motion.
Councilmember Bartoni,
Yes.
Councilmember Nian, Councilmember Farmer,
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
Yes.
Councilmember Rambo,
Yes.
Councilmember Flasher,
Yes.
Councilmember Brost,
Yes.
Councilmember Ottenberg,
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall, Councilmember Jaxi,
Yes.
Councilmember Hopper,
Yes.
Councilmember Galani.
Yes.
You need my vote?
Thank you. We're going to need another motion. The city attorney just advised. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Councilmember Garitano,
Yes.
The city attorney just advised we need to have another motion to add a section
Section 610.021 subsection 1,
which relates to,
privileged attorney-client communications.
okay. Is there a motion to go into executive session on that basis? Made by Councilmember Farmer, second by Councilmember Dodwell. Is there any discussion on the motion? See no discussion. Ms. Eldridge, please call the roll on the secondary motion to go into executive session on that basis.
Councilmember Bartoni,
Yes.
Councilmember Nian, Councilmember Farmer,
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon, Councilmember Rambo, Councilmember Flasher,
Yes.
Councilmember Garitano,
Yes.
Councilmember Brost,
Yes.
Councilmember Ottenberg,
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall, Councilmember Jaxi,
Yes.
Councilmember Hopper,
Yes.
Councilmember Galani.
Yes. All right, so we're going to go into the community room for executive session. And we will be back as soon as we are done. All right, council members, we are continuing in our work session. We need to adjourn it. Would someone like to make a motion to adjourn the work session of the city council made by council member Dodwell, seconded by council member Ottenberg, non-debatable motion. So all in favor of the motion to adjourn the work session of the city council, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. That takes us to our main meeting. I want to welcome everyone here this evening. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the city council for the city of Wildwood, Missouri for Monday, September 11, 2023. Ms. Eldridge, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Boland,
Here.
Councilmember Clark, Councilmember Bartoni,
Here.
Councilmember Nian, Councilmember Farmer,
Here.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
Here.
Councilmember Rambo,
Here.
Councilmember Flasher,
Here.
Councilmember Garitano,
Here.
Councilmember Bros,
Here.
Councilmember Edens, Councilmember Ottenberg,
Here.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Here.
Councilmember Marshall, Councilmember Jaxi,
Here.
Councilmember Hopper,
Here.
Councilmember Galani.
Here. All right, thank you and welcome again to everyone, especially those of you who are with us this evening in our council chambers. So council members, as I mentioned in work session, I would like permission to rearrange the agenda in two respects. Number one, Bill 2815, which relates to the McBride development that is for second reading. I would like to move that up. My reasoning is my understanding from discussions today is that the developer has asked for a motion to postpone this to the next meeting of the council. You may recall there have been discussions about what's going to be paid for the extension of the road, Main Street, and those discussions have not come to fruition yet. So I'd like to move it forward because we may have some people here this evening who are going to speak to that. And out of deference to their schedule, if we get it postponed, then the time to speak would be the next meeting. That's item number one. And then the second is Bill 2799, which, as we discussed in work session, based on what the council has done relative to solar panels, would need to be, in my opinion, at least postponed indefinitely, which would kill the bill. Is there any objection to moving those two things forward first? All right, seeing none, Bill 2815.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilmember
Number three
Bartoni.
on the agenda.
I'm sorry.
Number 3 on the agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance first. Thank you, Councilmember Bartoni, and then we'll do that. So for all those in the audience who are comfortably able, if you'd please stand with us for the Pledge of Allegiance, I appreciate it. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Thank you for that. Again, now Bill 2815 and 2799, moving those forward. Is there any objection to rearranging the agenda to that effect? All right. Thank you for that. Bill 2815 is now before the council for second reading. Is there any action anyone would like to take next relative to Bill 2815 as to a postponement? Councilmember Dodwell.
I'll make a motion that we postpone it at the request of the developer
To the next meeting of the council.
to the next meeting of the council.
Okay, is there a second to the motion to postpone? Second by Councilmember Farmer. Any discussion on the motion to postpone? See no discussion. All in favor of the motion to postpone, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that bill is postponed. And I want to thank, I think I saw the developer representatives here this evening. Thank you for being here, as well as those residents who came to speak on that. Next, Bill 2799, which came out of planning and zoning. It is before the council for first reading. Would someone like to make a motion to postpone indefinitely as to Bill 2799? Made by Councilmember McCutcheon, seconded by Councilmember Bartoni. Any discussion on the motion to postpone indefinitely? All in favor of the motion to postpone indefinitely, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. That takes us next to mayor announcements and appointments. Appointments are on the consent agenda. We'll get to those shortly. In terms of announcements, if the families of, we do have the microphone. Yes, I see it. If the families of former Mayor Glazer and former council member and HPC member Paul Wachakowski could please meet me over to the your left of the dais, I would appreciate it. All right, so one of the things that we do every September is to recognize people who have given their time, energy, and passion to the city of Wildwood in whatever capacity, whether an elected capacity or an appointed capacity. And we do these communally, and we have two, unfortunately, this year that I would like to recognize that are no longer with us after giving terrific service to our city. The first is former Mayor Glazer, and his family is here this evening. Thank you so much for being here. And I want to just give this to you as a token of our appreciation and in his remembrance for being part of our family in Wildwood. And the second is Paul Wachakowski's family. And I would like to give this to you on behalf of the city in thankfulness for his service. We also have a proclamation that came from our Historic Preservation Commission, because that is one of the things that Paul is passionate about and spent a lot of. If you'll bear with me, I'll just read this. Whereas the city of Wildwood, Missouri, at the recommendation of its Historic Preservation Commission, established a memorial tribute program in 2022 to recognize and thank volunteers for their excellence in historic preservation. Whereas within this program, there are 3 levels of recognition, with the Champions of Conservancy being the highest of them and requiring 6 or more years of service on the Historic Preservation Commission, leadership on the commission, leadership of a major initiative of the commission, volunteerism, or other type of unique or significant historical contribution to the city in the area's history. Whereas Paul Wachakowski served on the commission for 6 years and 3 months, was chair of the commission for 4 years and 8 months, led the initial stages of the planning and design effort for the Route 66 roadside park, volunteered at the Historic Preservation Tent at Celebrate Wildwood for several years, served as Planning and Zoning Commission member, and was a city council member representing Ward 8. Whereas with this award, the Historic Preservation Commission nominated Paul Wachakowski for the Champions of Conservancy recognition level on April 27, 2023, and the city of Wildwood approved it on May 8, 2023. And finally, whereas Paul Wachakowski served with enthusiasm, a respect for others, a love of this community, and a kindness that was infectious all around him. Now, therefore, it is hereby proclaimed that on this 11th day of September, 2023, the city of Wildwood hereby recognizes Paul Wachakowski for his outstanding service to this community and significant and enduring contributions to the preservation of its history. And speaking on a personal note, I just want to mention that right over there where council members Larry Brost and Scott Ottenberg are sitting, I believe is where I sat next to former councilmember Wachakowski when we were on the bench just a short time together. And I'd also like to mention, going back to former Mayor Glazer, he was the first mayor of the city, and one of my proudest moments in my now 7.5 years as mayor is when we added plaques, monuments rather, with plaque in the back of City Hall. If you haven't seen them there, you get a chance. It's over by the Memorial Garden on the way to the theater for all of our former mayors, including former Mayor Ed Marshall. And that recognition was long overdue. And it was just one of the best things in retrospect that I'm very proud that we did. And, you know, those things happen for a reason. So in any event, I want to thank both of the families for being with us this evening. And again, for letting them share their time and energy. One of the reasons we are the great city that we are is in large part because of what they did, what they contributed. So I would ask at this point, we all stand for a moment of silence in recognition of these 2 wonderful individuals. And also it is September the 11th, and in recognition of the horrible tragedy that came to our country on that Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda is public participation. I'd like to mention just a couple of things about that before we begin. Public comment is a valuable component of our meeting. Anyone who wishes to speak must complete a speaker card and hand it to our city clerk to your left. And if you're on Zoom and wish to speak, just use the raise hand feature. When your name is called, please state your name and ward. If you're not a city of Wildwood resident, your address. To ensure that all who wish to speak have the opportunity to do so, there is a 5-minute time limitation. And I will let you know when the time limit is reached. If you have any questions for us, please mention that during your remarks and identify the official you would like to respond. That official will make note of it. And at the conclusion of public participation, any official who chooses to respond will have 3 minutes to do so as to all questions directed to that official. The official may choose to respond to your questions after tonight's meeting, and we may also post any responses on the city council page of our website. And finally, please be respectful to others in making your remarks. This means that interrupting others and using profane and abusive language are prohibited. And I want to thank everyone in advance for following these. First speaker card, please.
The first speaker card is Jim Van Ness.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Attorney, Mr. City Administrator, and Council. My name is Jim Van Nest. I live at 17133 Windsor Crest in Ward 1. Right off the bat, I wanted to say I served on the council with Paul and want to second everything the mayor said about him. He was a wonderful man. What I'm here tonight is to, once again, the Windsor Crest alleys, you had received and filed tonight, and I wanted to thank you for everything you've done for us to help us get to this point. I just want to bring you up to date since the last time we've spoken to you. When we did the policy on private streets and alleys, there were some conditions. The Windsor Crest Homeowners Association has met all of those. One of them was to prove that we have the right to have the ownership of the alleys, and the indentures state that the Homeowners Association is the owners of it. But in the indentures was a clause that said to transfer the property to anyone else, to the city, needed 80% signatures of the homeowner. I'm happy to say we got 91% signatures. We had 100% approval, but the others that we didn't get signatures are absentee owners that are in New York, California, other places. And since we had 91%, we met that requirement. We've done some major repairs to the alleys to bring them up to city conditions. And we just say that the next thing up, I believe, will be an ordinance for the council to approve for us to move forward with you taking them. So we just want to say thank you for everything. And we will probably be back one more time. But we appreciate all your help you've given us. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker card.
The next speaker card is Glenn Scott.
Excuse me. Hello, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Attorney, City Administrator, and council people. My name is Glenn Scott. I live in Ward 2 at 16245 Windcrest Ridge Court. I would like to speak on the solar survey. I appreciate that you took the time. I mean, it was a good value for the city, but it still wasn't free. So I appreciate that you took the time and spent the money to do the survey and get the public opinion. It sounds like you are working expeditiously to get the proposals that are in the queue taken care of. I hope that the council can address my proposal tonight and the remaining ones in the queue at the next Planning and Zoning Committee. I hope when you craft the rules for the new law to allow for approval of home solar, similar to the permit process, that you make sure to make it relatively easy to apply with, and clear, and so people know in advance what the requirements are. And they can meet those requirements with their proposal, come to the city, quickly get it approved and work to save everybody time and money on the review process. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker card, please.
The next speaker card is Jeremy Rubenstein. Okay. Then the next,
Mr. Rubenstein? No, okay. Next speaker card, please.
the next speaker card is Nick Solutz.
Nick Schultz. I live in Washington, Missouri, actually. But I'm speaking in regards to Hankin, if there's any questions.
So this is just, that you're talking about the bill on the lot split for on
Yeah.
Hinkin Road in
Yeah.
Ward 6. Yep. So this is just your time to, speak on whatever you want to speak. We, not for questions and answers at this point. That
Oh,
would
okay.
happen potentially under planning and zoning if it gets. to that.
Well, I guess the one thing I want to state is, I guess there was some concern about the creek. All the driveways were purposely put south of the creek, so nothing actually crosses the creek. That's why there's a shared driveway.
Okay, thank you. Next speaker card, please.
Catherine Moore filled out a speaker card, but she's just here to answer any questions from the
Okay.
council.
Next speaker card, please.
The next speaker card is Betsy Vanderhayden.
Good evening. It's Betsy Vanderhayden, 16560 Birch Forest. I had a whole thing prepared today to read to you, but I'm seeing that Wildwood is actually on the right track now with the vote that took place today. And we're looking forward to seeing solar projects going speedily through the planning department, following whatever rules there are there, other than no front facing or visible panels, because it's clear that the survey shows we really want to see them in our neighborhoods, or at least we don't object to them. And I know there's been a lot of projects in the pipeline, and they've lost money because they did not weren't able to take advantage of their savings through solar, as well as there's a rebate with Ameren that ends December 15th. And if you don't have your project completed by that point, you lose out hundreds, in some cases, thousands of dollars in rebates from Ameren Electric. So as quickly as this can all be done, I actually said, we need more planning and zoning meetings if that's what it takes to get everyone through the pipeline and approved. My project is in the pipeline as well, so I'd appreciate a quick turnaround on getting approval for adding panels to my already wonderful solar system. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I do appreciate your votes tonight. Thanks.
Thank you. Next speaker card, please. Travis, anyone online? I don't see any. Okay, all right, I want to thank everyone who came this evening to speak at public participation. That concludes it, and we have no public hearings this evening. Moving into second readings, Bill 2815 was postponed earlier. That takes us to bills 2816 that concerns new regulations for e-bikes, affects all wards. Bill 2817 relating to an agreement with the Missouri Highway and Transportation Commission relating to Transportation Enhancement Funds Program, and that affects Ward 5. The next is Bill 2819, affecting all wards relating to needed changes by virtue of state law, unfortunately, to home-based businesses. Next is Bill 2820, also affecting all wards that relates to new regulations requested by the council as to temporary banners. My question is, would there be any objection to handling these four bills in unison, in mass? Any objection to that? All right. Four. Okay. So bills 2816, 2817, 2819, 28 and 2820 are before the council for final passage. And as indicated, they concern respectively all wards, Ward 5, and the last two also affect all wards. Is there a motion for the second reading of the bills? Made by Councilmember McCutcheon, seconded by Councilmember Nye. All in favor of the second reading motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Eldridge, please read the four bills.
Bill number 2816, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, amending Title II of the Code of Ordinances of the city of Wildwood by adding definitions for motor vehicles and publicly owned properties to section 235.020 and enacting a new section 235.115 for the regulation of e-bikes within the city of Wildwood, second reading. Bill number 2817, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to negotiate and execute a Transportation Enhancement Funds Program agreement by and between the city of Wildwood with the Missouri Highways and Transportation Commission to obtain federal funding to design and construct the Green Pines Park Connector Trail Shared Use Path, second reading. Bill number 2819, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, amending Title IV of the Code of Ordinances of the city of Wildwood by amending sections 415.030, 415.090, 415.110, 415.120, 415.130, 415.140, 415.150, 415.160, and 415.380 for the regulation of home occupations and home-based businesses within the city's residential zoning districts and the NU non-urban residence district, second reading. Bill number 2820, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, amending Title IV of the Code of Ordinances of the city of Wildwood by deleting section 415.440D4 in its entirety and enacting in lieu thereof a new section 415.440D4 for the regulation of temporary banners within the city, second reading.
Thank you. Mr. Vinich, do you have anything you want to add relative to Bill 2816, 2819, or 2820?
No, sir, Mr. Mayor, but thank you for asking. They remain unchanged from introduction, but the department is available for any comments or questions.
Does any member of the council have any questions for Mr. Vinich on any of those three bills or a comment? All right. Fair enough. Seeing none, Mr. Brown, relative to Bill 2817, the agreement with Missouri Highway and Transportation Commission, do you have anything you want to add relative to that bill?
Thank you, Mayor Boland. Nothing additional at this time, but I'm available for any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Brown relative to this bill? All right, Councilmember Dodwell.
Never mind. I'll talk offside.
Okay. Seeing nothing further, Ms. Eldridge, please call the roll for final passage of bills 2816, 2817, 2819, and 2820.
Councilmember Nyan. Councilmember Farmer.
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon.
Yes.
Councilmember Rainbow. Councilmember Flasher.
Yes.
Councilmember Garitano.
Yes.
Councilmember Brost.
Yes.
Councilmember Ottenberg.
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell.
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall.
Yes.
Councilmember Jaxi.
Yes.
Councilmember Hopper.
Yes.
Councilmember Galani.
Yes.
Councilmember Bartoni.
Yes.
Okay, that takes us to first readings. We're going to handle the first two separately. Bill 2821 is before the council for first reading. It concerns all wards. Is there a motion for the first reading of the bill? Made by Councilmember Farmer, seconded by Councilmember Hopper. All in favor of the motion for first reading, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Eldridge, please read Bill 2821 for the first time.
Bill number 2821, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, revising the budget for the city of Wildwood, Missouri for the fiscal year commencing on January 1, 2023 and ending on December 31, 2023. First reading.
Mr. Lee, do you have anything you would like to mention relative to Bill 2821?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So a couple things tonight. This is just a mid-year adjustment. I did want to note a couple items here. Under the utility tax, we actually got a tax settlement that was finalized, and that did result in a getting the city around $1 million, roughly $1 million, added to the end balance revenue, which we can, my personal recommendation would be potentially using some of those funds in order to make improvements here at the building, since the ad hoc building committee has been developed. So I do think that some of those funds could be used for that purpose. A couple other notes here, just generally, and I'll let our department heads speak to some of their projects. But as for our administrative piece, we did save a significant sum of money, considering the fact that I was promoted and was put in the city administrator role. So we did see a decrease in the actual costs for personnel. Yes, you can see it in the notes there. It's pretty fun. We are saving cash. Also, that and another thing I would point out. Is that, we do really need to look at that $1 million and see how we would like to spend it. There's a couple items that we might want to look to. I think the phase 2 of the internet project, it would need to be transferred out of the current bank account that it's in. We'd have to transfer it over to the ARPA funds. But also we could potentially utilize it for, a plethora of different projects, hopefully also looking at the building with the ad hoc committee, looking further into that. Another item I did want to note is that with the grass cutting that we have, we're looking at a new process with that. We plan on tiering out an RFP where we separate abatements and because right now I'll explain the RFP in a second, but we are right now, getting pretty stained since Mr. Gailey did retire last year. So the price to maintain our beautiful city has gone up pretty substantially. In this case, we wanted to hone in and be able to differentiate. We're getting billed at the same rate no matter what they're cutting. So we're hoping that when we do bring on an arborist or someone of the like, but also in the interim, the director of public works and the director of planning will be working towards having an RFP for a 3-tiered system. So you would have a quote come in for abatements. That would be one specific number. We'd also have a quote coming in for the public right of way. So that'd be another number, probably going to be the most expensive rate. But then thirdly, we would have one for our parks and trails. We hope that by putting it into a tiered system that it makes it more competitive and that we can come in at a rate that is a little bit more reasonable. Members of the Planning and Parks Committee have noted with Mr. Bunich diligently doing this, providing a report each month of how much we are spending for maintaining our parks and trails. So we hope by doing this, we will save significant money and hopefully get that bill down to where we were with when Gailey was working with us. Other than that, there were no other serious major pieces of concern other than the maintenance of the building. We did see a little bit more money have to go towards that. We've had some issues come up, which we'll also be discussing today for the HVAC system. But other than that, the department is available for any questions. And if Mr. Bunich or Mr. Brown would like to speak to the projects that they're working on, would be more than happy to entertain that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Mr. Brown, do you have anything you want to mention further relative to the budget?
Mayor Bullen, I do not at this time, but if there's any specific questions, I'd be glad to entertain them. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Brown? All right, seeing none. Mr. Vintage, anything you would like to mention relative to the budget?
No, sir. Thank you for asking. But again, like Mr. Brown, I'm available for any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Vintage? Okay. All right. So is there a need for a second reading on this?
And at this time, there is no need for a second reading, but would not be opposed to it.
Okay, since it's a significant budgetary issue, I'd say we just stay pat and handle it at the next meeting. That takes us to Bill 2822. This concerns the proposed subdivision in Hinkin Hills Estates in Ward 6. Is there a motion for the first reading of the bill? Councilmember Rambo.
I have an observation first. Trying to save time overall. I'm speaking directly to the developer, Mr. Schultz. He's here. We have to be more careful with drainage. We are always careful with tree protection. And we have a new park going in just to the south, immediately to the south of your proposed development. And we need to be more careful about those things than I think your proposal has been. And so I'm happy to, if it's appropriate, to meet with you and the department to talk about my concerns rather than list them all here. But I think we can, I don't know, Mr. Mayor, if it's appropriate to just postpone this until next.
We need a motion or we're for first reading or a motion otherwise.
So what would you suggest, given that I'm interested in helping him move this forward, but I don't know that it's appropriate to have a first reading yet?
I think a motion to postpone would be in order to the
Okay,
next
so
meeting.
I would move to postpone this until the next meeting with the stipulation that we can meet with the department at Mr. Schultz's convenience and talk through these issues.
Okay. Is there a second to the motion to postpone? Seconded by Councilmember Jaxi. Is there any discussion on the motion to postpone? See no discussion. All in favor of the motion to postpone, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The bill is postponed to the next meeting. That takes us to Bill 2823, which relates to an agreement with Doring Engineering for retrofitting detention basins as to Cox Creek that affects wards 7 and 8. Bill 2824, which relates to a supplemental agreement with the Missouri Highways and Transportation Departments for turn lane improvements in wards 1 and 6. And similarly, Bill 2825, in agreement with the commission relating to intersection improvements on Highway 100 at Pond Road and at State Road affecting wards 1 and 6. Bill 2826, which relates to increasing the amount authorized by ordinance number 2792 for resurfacing by NB West in Ward 8. Would there be any objection to handling those first readings in mass? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion for the first reading of bills 2823, 2824, 2825, and 2826? Made by Councilmember Hopper, seconded by Councilmember Galani. Ms. Eldridge, please read the bills for the first time. Oh, I'm sorry. All in favor of the motion for first reading, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? And thank you, Ms. Eldridge. Now, please read the bills for the first time.
Bill number 2823, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with Doring Engineering Incorporated for professional services relating to survey work for the anticipated retrofits of up to 8 existing detention/retention basins located in the upper reaches of the Cox Creek watershed in order to improve their functions and water storage capabilities. First reading. Bill number 2824, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to negotiate and execute a supplemental agreement with the Missouri Highways and Transportation Commission for state funding for the design and construction of turn lane improvements on State Route 100 at Manchester Road / Booness Lane, Woodland Meadows Drive, Hinkin Road, and Hawks Rest Road / Windy Hollow Lane in the city. First reading. Bill number 2825, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to negotiate and execute a supplemental agreement with the Missouri Highways and Transportation Commission for state funding for the design and construction of intersection improvements on State Route 100 at Pond Road and at State Route T in the city. First reading. Bill number 2826, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, amending section 2 of ordinance number 2792 of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, increasing the total authorization amount for the city contractor agreement authorized pursuant to said ordinance number 2792 to allow for the resurfacing of Center Avenue by NB West Contracting Company. First reading.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Eldridge. So relative to Bill 2823, Mr. Benich, do you have anything you want to add?
Mr. Mayor, very briefly, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, this particular contract is for the required survey work to assist the other consultant, Todd Wagner of Wagner and Associates, with the modeling requirements, as well as to ensure if retrofits are made, the low sill elevations of surrounding buildings are not breached. That means the lowest opening on a home. So it's part needing it for modeling and part making sure that if we do anything, we do it safely. If there are any questions, the department would be glad to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Benich? All right, Mr. Brown, do you have anything you want to add relative to bills 2824, 2825, or 2826?
Thank you, Mayor Boland. I do not at this time. Again, I'm available for any questions from the city council, though.
Any questions for Mr. Brown relative to the bills? All right, seeing none, the bills will be on the agenda for the next council meeting for final passage. We've already handled Bill 2799. That takes us to that takes us to we have no resolutions. That takes us to the consent agenda. And on the consent agenda, we have the minutes from the August 14, 2023 council meeting and work session, the approval of expenditures, the appointments. And I did learn today that we need to remove Councilmember Farmer for a technical reason. That has to be run through the SID board before we present it to the council. So there's no objection. We're going to modify the consent agenda by removing that. Any objection? All right. That takes us next to provisional judge. This is basically the backup judge, Wildwood resident Andrew Brumman, lots of experience in municipal matters. The appointment of Chris Preston, who's already on our Board of Public Safety from Ward 1 to the Historic Preservation Commission alternate position, and a name that will be familiar to you, the appointment of former Councilmember Dave Bertolino to an alternate position on the Board of Adjustment and an alternate position on the Board of Ethics. And we have 3 resolutions, 2023-16, which relates to enhanced procedure for disclosure of potential conflicts of interest by municipal officials. Bill 2023-17 that relates to an agreement with Integrated Facility Services for repairing our building, City Hall's HVAC system. And finally, Resolution 2023-18, which relates to a resolution that supports our Historic Preservation Fund grant application to the state historic preservation relating to Route 66 historic context study and inventory. So those are all the items on the consent agenda. If they're, with the exception of the item that was removed, the appointment of Councilmember Farmer, that'll be on the next agenda, I believe, for October. So if there are no other concerns, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented. Councilmember Galani.
I just had one question. I wasn't present at the August 14th meeting, so I would want to abstain.
All right, we will remove minutes and handle that separately. Let's do the consent agenda. We'll come back to that. My apology for not recognizing that.
No problem.
Councilmember Farmer.
I'll make the motion
to approve the consent agenda as presented with the exception of the minutes and your appointment. Is there a second? Councilmember Marshall seconds. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Minutes, I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes as presented, made by Councilmember Farmer, seconded by Councilmember Dodwell. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? We have 2 abstentions, Councilmember Hopper and Councilmember Galani. That takes us to miscellaneous. One thing I'd like to mention, you just heard our city administrator indicate that we had, I believe, a windfall, well, not a windfall, but an increase that we didn't anticipate of $1 million from a class action settlement. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And as you know, we're operating with balanced budgets. I have asked the city administrator for our next council meeting to consider the possibility of a rebate with our city attorney or a refund to our residents of that amount, given that our residents have experienced an increase in the crash costs. I think it would be a nice gesture if we are able to do it on the part of the city to offer that to our residents. So we will have a report on that at the next council meeting. I just wanted to give you a heads up that I'm asking him to look into that. Okay. Anything else under miscellaneous? Councilmember Farmer.
Yeah, I just had a question about in the work session, there was a little piece in here about the sound study and some things we might be doing to implement that. Can we maybe get that to the McBride people since they're in the process of figuring some things out so that we don't let them know that that's going through the process as they're trying to build their plan up so we can work together, hopefully, to get the sound situation figured out?
You're talking about in the context of the new development or
yeah. So, we did our mitigation study. And so there's a pilot program to try to do a couple things. And certainly one of those things would be perhaps the new development right in the red on Manchester Road there when it comes to sound. So providing, I know they've talked about having a sound release sign, which is great, but this would be an alternate version to kind of help that process work a little bit better, maybe. So I just wanted to make sure maybe we could get it to them so they can see what it is.
Sure, without objection, we'll do that. More information is better. Saw another hand over here. Councilman Rambo.
It was me, just real quickly. I was told that the phase 2 of the internet project might be costing us a whole lot more than we originally thought. Thomas, do you have any information on that, or is my source defective?
Thank you, Councilmember Rambo. In this case, we do not have a firm number right now. I will say that our resident inquiries resulted in 471 additional addresses that would need to be added to the mix. If you take into account that it's cost us 6.75 million for 2,025 homes, then just kind of doing rough math there, a couple mil. So in this case, there's also another document that will be coming to us from Spectrum that highlights the internet speeds for each property within the city. So this will most likely result in additional addresses needing to be added to that list. Just based off the fact that if they're under 100 megabits per second, that would qualify them.
Okay, as we're thinking about the windfall, we should think about that.
Yep. Yes, and on top of that too, we are looking into the BEAD program funding for additional help with the internet.
Agree is better.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I think we have money to pay for that without. Okay, Councilmember Dodwell.
I'd just like to make a request that Joe and Rick attend the meeting here in this room because it's hard to hear them through the speakers.
Okay, so Meg, without objection, we'll ask our directors, Vinich and Brown, to be in the room at council meetings and work sessions. We used to do.
Yeah. And then I've got one other question. We have, I know one resident sitting here, but we've got several residents that have solar projects sitting for approval. What are our next steps going to be with those individuals so that they can move forward before any rebates run out, et cetera? Do we have to have our guidelines approved by council?
So I thought I mentioned this earlier.
Maybe
but,
I missed it.
So there are two classes of those. One class are 3 or 4 that are before the Planning and Zoning Commission that have not reached. They've been postponed at that level. They haven't come to the council. And then we have 2 that are before the council. One of those involves litigation. So the 4 that are before the Planning and Zoning Commission will be, my understanding from talking with with Travis, I believe, those are going to be on the Planning and Zoning Commission's agenda for action at the next meeting. And I don't think it's necessary to have the legislation prepared. They get the point. In a perfect world, it'd be nice to have the legislation to give even better guidance, but we need to accommodate the time schedule that they're on. And I think the better choice in balancing the interest is to have those on the agenda for decision at the next meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Yeah.
Okay. And if they'll come to the council and if you don't like what happens, you can change it there. Okay. And then the other 2, the city attorney indicated he needs to discuss in executive session with the council. That's the next meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Saw another hand or not. Okay. Anything else? All right. A motion to adjourn made by Councilmember Farmer. Seconded by Councilmember Galani. It's a non-debatable motion. All in favor of the motion to adjourn, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you for a great meeting.